My name is Patti Lynett, officially Patricia Brady Lynett. I grew up in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, on Madison Avenue. We were in a neighborhood that had a lot of kids, so we were always outside. I mean, nobody had, iPads or any of that kind of stuff. Needless to say, I don't even know if we had a TV when I was really little, but we just had a lot of fun. We played outside all the time. In the summers, we went to Lake Winola, and that was always fun. My family had a place up there. I went to St. Paul's High School in Scranton. I met my husband around Christmas time of my junior year in high school, and he was a senior at Scranton Prep. He walked up to me, this was halftime of this game. He walked up to me and he sort of knocked me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you want to go down to Kay's after the game?"
Unbeknownst to me, Greg went up to Patti during the game and said, "If George Lynett asks you out, will you say yes?" And before she could answer Greg, I guess said, "Patti, if you don't go out with him, he'll never ask another girl out again." So Patti said to Greg, yes. Greg comes back to me and says, "You can ask Patti Brady out. She's already said yes."
I looked at him, I said, "I guess so." I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting. But that's what he said. "Hey, you want to go down Kay's?" We went out maybe a couple months later, and in the meantime, I was thinking, well, that's that. He just probably didn't have a good time. I mean, what do you know? I didn't give it much thought.
I didn't ask her out again, I think, until late February. So it was 2 months. I'm sure I couldn't get the courage up to call her on the phone. I was always a nervous wreck that I would run out of things to say. And I shouldn't have been nervous because Patti was a good talker. But that had to be the reason. For some reason, I waited 2 months.
And then at the end of that school year, he was leaving to go up to Holy Cross College for 4 years. So we were kind of on and off there for a while because he'd be out of town all the time.
I used to call home every Sunday at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon from college to my home, to my mom and dad. And that was our tradition. Well, sometime along the line, I convinced Patti to come down to my house at 1 o'clock, and she would be there. And after Mom and Dad and Celia and Edward and Bill, I'd talk to Patti.
We actually got married the weekend after I graduated from college, because at that point he was in the Navy, and his ship was going to ship out. He had about 10 days from my graduation time to maybe 2 weeks from the day I graduated till when he had to report to his ship. We had an apartment in Norfolk, Virginia, because that was his base. But every time he left the base, I drove home. I didn't know anybody in Norfolk. So I'd come home and stay at my mother's house, It was always great to know he was coming home. And when he was home for good, it was wonderful.
It was duty that I'm proud I did. So I look back on it, and I'm happy I did it. But going through it, I wasn't happy a lot, and basically because I really wanted to be home.
I had an apartment here, actually, in Scranton first, and then bought a house up in Glenburn. And that's where I ended up having 2 babies. And then when the second was coming, I'm saying, okay, that's enough for now. And our 3rd child was born 2 years later, and our 4th child was born 10 years later. And it's funny, there's 10 years between Sharon and my son Jimmy. And then George would be 12 years older than her, and my daughter Sheila is 13 years older than her. And I have to say, Sheila and Sharon are the best of friends. They do everything together that they can. It's great. That age difference makes no difference.
Sheila's a wonderful girl, a wonderful mother. She has 4 great kids. She's married to Jamie Stallman, who is a wonderful son-in-law. Our other daughter, Sharon. Sharon's younger than Sheila. This year, she's in the management development program at Time Shamrock, and she's spending a year out in Milwaukee. So we don't see her as often this year. But when she comes in, we're happy to see her, and she spends a lot of time with us.
My son George, who's followed all the way in his father's footsteps, he's publisher down at the Time Shamrock.
He went to prep, he went to Holy Cross, he served in the Navy. He was a better student than me, he was a better naval officer than me. He is now married to Katie Lisk, and they have 4 beautiful, wonderful kids.
My son Jimmy is the cruise director for the Disney Cruise Line, and he and his wife live in Australia with 3 children. His wife is from Australia, so that's where they are.
You don't see them for 8 or 10 months, and it's like they saw you 2 minutes ago. There's no strangeness, no hesitancy. They run over to you, give you a big love and a big kiss. They're great kids. We're very blessed. Well, Patty would be the disciplinarian. I'd get home at night after work, and one of the kids would do something that I thought was just, okay, well, that wasn't real nice, but it's not real bad. And Patty would go through the roof at them. And, then the kids would go to bed, we'd put them to bed. I said, well, Patty, why did you get so mad at Jimmy he didn't. She said, you didn't spend the whole day with him. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. And she'd just fly off the handle. So she really was a disciplinarian, certainly more than me. The kids, when they were in trouble, would rather deal with me than with Patty.
So it's fun. Grandkids are really fun. I wish I had them before the kids. I get teased about the fact that when they come up here, how come there's always sugar cereal and, Pop-Tarts and all this kind of stuff? And they said, you never let us have that. And I said, no, but they can have whatever they want.
They're just 100% joy because you're with them, you love them, you don't have to punish them for any reason. That's not our role in their lives. We love to have them visit. Sometimes you love to see them come, and then you love to see them go because, when they go, the house is a mess, but that's kids being kids. But it's almost all the fun of raising children and none of the tough work. Grandchildren are wonderful.
My oldest sister had breast cancer 20 years before and was fine, was in remission. She later ended up with breast cancer again, but they claimed it wasn't the same thing. And my mother, in her mid-80s, had colon cancer. Nobody else had breast cancer or any other kind of cancer that I was aware of. I sometimes wonder, did they know what these things were to diagnose them that way? But the date was March 18th, and I went for a mammogram at Advanced Imaging, like I did. All of a sudden you're getting called back for another round of pictures and blah, blah, blah. Then an ultrasound, and now I'm getting worried because I never had that. Yeah, it stuns you. I don't know how else to explain it, but the doctor's trying to tell you that there's something there without actually telling you that it's cancer. And everybody uses the same thing. Your life changes on the spot. It does. Now you realize you're vulnerable. That's scary. You were always vulnerable, but you didn't think about it. I remember walking out to the car and I was shaking. I'm starting the car thinking, I don't know if I can drive this thing home. And I get a call from my son-in-law, who they had sent the things to. And I said to him, Jamie, is it cancer? He said, yeah. So that was the start. It all went on from there.
It was like a kick in the stomach. And, that she had breast cancer. We held off for a few days to tell our kids. I think we told them up at George and Katie's house. We were up there for a dinner. And the three were there. Now, Jimmy wasn't there. He was on the ship. And she told them. And, of course, they were scared, upset. All the reactions that a human being would have over something like that. And then we called Jimmy. And actually, Jimmy talked to his boss at Disney. And Disney gave him, it was either 7 or 10 days off, because his boss said, look, you should be home with your mother. So Jimmy flew home. In a couple of days following that, I know we all had the feeling or the hope that it was a very early catch. And early on, a lot of us hoped that it had not traveled. Now that worked out. It did travel.
Usually when you have mammograms, that information goes to your doctor and then you get a call from your doctor. Well, in this case, they weren't going to wait for that.
So I know there was a couple of nights, we're sitting over in the corner of the house, and it's the four kids, Sheila, Sharon, George and Jimmy, and Patty and myself. And the four kids are sitting there, and they're just staring at Patty.
And I finally said to them, you got to stop this. I'm not going to explode. I'm not going to implode. I appreciate the attention, but let's move on. We have other things to do here. And then that was right before I had the surgery itself. That was tough because the doctors really did not think I would need to have chemotherapy, and I did. So that scared me a lot.
But it was tough to absorb. But I think we absorbed it over time. The immediate reaction was just lots of tears. Patty had a fear of chemo, which 100% of the people do have a fear of chemo. I really had no idea what she was facing. I mean, I've heard of chemotherapy, I've heard of radiation. I didn't realize that this was going to be like an 8-month time period of going through the chemo and then taking a little bit of a rest and then going through radiation.
There's a lot of side effects, of which I had very few. I was very lucky. I pictured myself always being sick to my stomach, which I was not. And, losing your hair, that's not nice.
This was after between the first and second treatments, and we were down in New York because she was getting a wig. I wasn't there, but Sheila and Sharon were there, thank goodness. He told her, I'm brushing your hair and the hair's coming out. So want me to shave your head now? And Patti immediately said, no, I don't want you to shave my head now. And Sheila and Sharon said, well, Mom, why not? And then the hairdresser said, if I don't do it now, you'll have to come back in 3 or 4 days to New York. And he said, then I'll do it. And she said, that's all I have left. Sharon and Sheila gave her the strength and the support, really, to get her hair shaved. And all she said to the guy was, turn me around, I don't want to look in the mirror, And he shaved her head. He had the wig ready for her. So when she came out and I saw her, and she looked great. I think if Sharon and Sheila weren't with her that day, it would have been much more difficult for her.
I mean, it just changes your whole world. You start looking at things differently, and you have to. But previously, you thought you were you had a buffer zone all around you, and then you find out you don't. So, I mean, it hurt him as much as it hurt me.
I went to all the chemo appointments I went to, and they would go on for about 3 hours.
And I'd say to him, why don't you go get some coffee, or why don't you no, I'll just sit here and read the paper, and it would be hours for those chemotherapy treatments. Yeah, you're sitting there for hours. He wouldn't leave. During those chemotherapy months, we were up at our place at the lake, and some of the kids, they move in with us. And I thought to myself, I can't be sitting around moping and teary and acting like the little old lady in the corner who's sick all the time. You pushed harder because they were there, and I'm grateful for that, because they still make you laugh. I mean, kids make you laugh because they don't get it. It's great.
You got to approach it like a partnership, like you're going through this with your lover and your best friend, because that's who they are. George
and I have always had a strong relationship because we've always been best friends. It has to be give and take, and we always did that. I mean, we just always did that. It's just we like being together, and we never tired of it, and it's now been 50 years. So it's hard to believe. Every time I say that, I think that must be my parents. That can't be me, but it's me. But I told you about my oldest sister who had it 20 years previous, and it went all right. I mean, she was in remission all those years. About a year and a half before I was diagnosed, she was re-diagnosed with a breast cancer that was much more aggressive, totally different. And she went through treatments, and it wasn't going to cure it. The same time I'm having treatments here, I'm diagnosed in March. She died in May, and right at the same time I was diagnosed, my other sister Sharon was diagnosed with, I think they were really calling it pre-cancer type of thing, but they wanted to play it safe, and they did some surgery on her. She had to have radiation. So there's 3 out of 4 girls at the same time going through this is quite remarkable. My sister Sharon is fine, thank God, and she's here tonight at this affair. My sister Janie, it was really sad. She just couldn't beat this one. It was a very aggressive type of thing, and that's unfortunately the case. I mean, many of these things can be cured, but people do still die from this, and so you never forget that.
I can't imagine, and I hope I never have to imagine, like if one of my children or grandchildren was battling cancer. And I know parents and grandparents go through that all the time. I don't know how I'd handle that. I mean, it was so difficult, handling it with Patti, but you have to do it. I mean, you'd have to be there for them just like I wanted to be there for Patti.
I mean, you survive it. You keep a sense of humor about it, because if you don't, I would imagine, I think, the hardest would be if you were doing this alone. That would be very, very hard to me. I mean, I had such a great support system with my children, my husband, who's my rock star, as you know, and my grandchildren.
It affects so many families. I mean, there's probably very few families out there that haven't been in some shape or form affected by cancer. If we could ever find, the cure, what kind of a price tag do you put on ending all that human misery, of going through the treatment for cancer? I mean, to end that kind of misery for human beings, how do you put a price tag on it? But you have to know it has to be a top priority, for everybody.
I think it's very important to give and to do what you can in any other way. I mean, these scientists, it's quite amazing to me what they have accomplished already. And the changes in cancer care even in the last few years. Some of the things that are happening even today, where I was only going through this 2 years ago. But without people contributing in both time and money, these things couldn't be accomplished, I don't think. It all mounts up and it all makes a difference. I'm certainly sure of that. Being asked to do this, Coaches versus Cancer, I really had to give that some pretty serious thought, because it's not a topic that you love talking about, except that I would always talk to anybody that was going to be would say to me, now they're going to go through this and what's it like? And I'd take days to talk to anybody individually like that, because I didn't have anybody to ask what was ahead. What is this going to be like? And then when I thought about this, and my husband was one of the pushers of this, he said, we talk about doing corporal works of mercy. Maybe you can help someone. Now people can know if they want to talk to you. I'm listed in the book. Just call me. I'll talk to anybody that wants to talk about it. I can at least say, I felt the same way. It's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. I mean, they do things now to make something like chemotherapy a little easier for you. It's no fun, but you'll get through this. And that's something that I think I wasn't sure of. I didn't know anybody that close to me that had it other than my sister, who was at that point dying, and I didn't have anybody to ask. So anybody that wants to ask me anything, here I am.